In today's edition of NHL Trade Talk, we're looking at all the teams in the Pacific Division. Who will be buyers? Who will be sellers? We're going to discuss the whole division coming up next. Hey everyone, and welcome back to another video here at Top Shelf Hockey. If you're new to the channel, thanks for stopping by. We review and discuss all 31 NHL teams. So if you're a huge hockey fan, consider subscribing and clicking the bell so you don't miss anything. So let's jump in here and take a look at the Pacific Division. Let's take a look at who we think is going to be selling off assets and retooling for the future, and who's going to be going for it to make the playoffs and see what they can do here as we approach the trade deadline. Let's start with the Edmonton Oilers, easily the biggest disappointment and biggest surprise in this division this year. It's hard to fathom how a team with McDavid and Draisaitl are struggling so badly, especially in the offensive categories. I wouldn't be completely surprised if we seen a player like Patrick Maroon get moved here by the Oilers. He's a pending UFA, and I think personally he could use a change of scenery. The Oilers, I think, they have too many guys like him and Lucic who are a little bit too slow-footed to keep up with these young guys like McDavid and Draisaitl. I mean, McDavid's the fastest skater in the league, and when his wingers can't keep up with him, I'm sure that makes it a challenge to create a lot offensively. So therefore, I wouldn't be completely surprised to see Maroon move on. I think some likely destinations for him could be a team like New Jersey, Nashville, maybe San Jose, maybe St. Louis. St. Louis less likely. They've made it clear they're not really overly interested in a rental situation unless they work out a deal, or maybe it's a sign and trade. And St. Louis has lots of bright prospects that maybe the Oilers could get back for the future. So that might be a good place to talk. However, I think either way, it's quite likely Maroon's on the move. But I wouldn't be completely surprised either if they work out a lower valued extension to hang on to him for a year or two. But in my opinion, I think they should move him, get back what they can, and retool for next year. Now let's look at the other major surprise in this division this year, which is the Vegas Golden Knights. Obviously, they're in first place. They're flying high. It seems like nothing can stop these guys. I would be quite surprised if they do a whole lot at the deadline now. I don't think they're going to be willing to give up too many of their picks and prospects for future to go for it this year. And I don't really think they really need to. They've proven all year that they have a pretty solid team. They can beat anybody at any given time. So I don't think George McPhee's going to be doing a whole lot here. Maybe adding a little bit of extra depth that can never hurt for the playoffs, and something that you don't have to give up a whole lot for to obtain, like maybe a defenseman that can play like a 5, 6, 7 role, or maybe a depth forward who can step in due to injury. I don't see them doing a whole lot besides that. I mean, Vegas has done tremendous this year, and they're easily the greatest expansion team in the NHL that they've ever seen. They just broke the record recently for most wins by an expansion team, and they're well on their way to just setting more records and doing phenomenal things this season. So if there's any Vegas fans watching this video right now, I'm sure you must be pleased with the first season for your new team, and I don't imagine you're going to see a whole lot here at the deadline. You never know, though. Vegas has been surprising us all year. Maybe they'll surprise us with a move at the deadline to bring in another top guy, but I wouldn't hold my breath. I think they're going to be standing pat, maybe adding a little bit of depth, and that's probably about it. Next, let's take a look at the Vancouver Canucks. I think it's one obvious solution here that they may look to move Thomas Vanek. I know he's a pending UFA, and they could probably fetch a half-decent return as he goes on to another team to help them for the playoffs. Although he has been a good mentor to their young players, and I know they're a little bit, I think, a little hesitant to possibly move him, and they might consider trying to get him signed to an extension and keep him in Vancouver a little bit longer. That wouldn't be a complete shocker, but at the same time, Vanek's kind of been known as a typical rental player every year, so it's hard to say what goes on there, but I think there's a pretty good chance he gets moved. They could probably fetch themselves at least a second-round pick or something in return, and they can just give even more playing time to their young guys with Vanek out of the way. Now, the other big thing in Vancouver, that the question I want to pose to you guys watching here, it's not so much about the trade deadline, because I don't expect this to go down, but will the Sedins come back next year, and will they stay in Vancouver for at least one more season? They've proven this year that they can still be pretty productive. They don't seem to be slowing down too much. They still have some legs left, so I wouldn't be completely shocked to see them come back. I think their ideal solution is for them to stay in Vancouver, and I think the Canucks seem to be content keeping them to be lifelong Canucks and to retire in that jersey when the time is right. So what do you think out there, Vancouver fans? Are the Sedins going to be coming back for another year? Now let's take a look at the San Jose Sharks. The San Jose Sharks are in a difficult position with star forward Joe Thornton sidelined for several weeks due to a knee injury which did require surgery. So, I mean, obviously that might force their hand, but at the same time, I know the Sharks are looking forward to next year and having all kinds of cap space. It's been rumored they may be a big player trying to go after John Tavares should he hit the open market on July the 1st. So I don't think they're willing to do too much crazy stuff here in order to add too much salary onto their books that's going to weigh them down before next year. Obviously, they're currently in a playoff spot. They're trying hard to hang on to that spot, and I can't imagine that they're going to do too much here to risk their future. Even though they want to make the playoffs and see what they can do here, I can't imagine that they're going to bring in any big-name players. I know at one point they've been a team that's been mentioned for like teams like Mike Hoffman, Evander Kane, Max Pacioretty. You know, it's possible they could bring in one of these guys, but at the same time, I don't think it's going to happen. I think the Sharks are going to more than likely not do too much. I think they're kind of looking forward to having the extra cap space and dealing with their issues in the offseason. But Sharks fans out there, with Joe Thornton down with another major knee injury that's back-to-back years where he's had big injuries that are pretty significant, is Joe Thornton going to be continuing his career beyond this season? Certainly leave some comments down below. I'd like to know what you think. I think Joe Thornton, myself, would probably like to keep playing, but I guess we'll see how he recovers from this injury, and we'll go from there. Be a shame to see Jumbo Joe retire this way, and I'd like to see him come back for at least one more year and play things out the way that he'd like to. It's probably one of the best players to never get his name on the Stanley Cup. So if he can come back for the playoffs and the Sharks can keep things going here, I know he'd be a welcome addition to have back before the playoffs kick in. Let's take a look at the Calgary Flames. The Calgary Flames have been a bit of a disappointing team as of late. They kind of had an up and down season, but lately they've been losing games and just haven't been keeping things together very well. Goaltending's been a little bit inconsistent. I've seen a few Flames games where Mike Smith's been not having the greatest starts. So it's hard to say what the Flames do. I mean, one player that's going to be on the market that I think would be a good fit in Calgary is Michael Grabner. He doesn't have a huge contract. He's a pending UFA. The guy can fly, so he can keep up well with a lot of their fast forwards, and the guy can score. I mean, maybe the Rangers would be looking to take back maybe a younger player in return. I'm sure that the Flames probably wouldn't mind parting with Troy Brouwer, but that's probably a contract that no team's going to want to take on. If they did do a deal, for example, to get Grabner, maybe Curtis Lazar, for example, who's never really panned out in the NHL. I'm not sure if the Rangers would really want that in return. He would be going on to his third team and yet to really establish himself. I know when the Flames picked him up from Ottawa a while back, they gave up a second-round pick to get him, and so far that deal's not looking too good for the Flames. They probably wouldn't mind cutting ties with him, but at the same time, I'm not sure that's something the Rangers are going to want in order to give up Grabner. Taking a look now at the Arizona Coyotes, I think it's safe to say obviously their playoff hopes are for another year down the drain. They definitely need to retool and maybe take a look at a fresh start for next year. Hard to say what they're going to do, but there is a couple pending UFAs that more than likely get moved if they can find a deal. Defensemen Luke Schenn and Kevin Connaughton are more than likely going to get moved, I would think. They're pending UFAs. I would say they're not likely to return, but you never know. But they might as well trade these guys and get back with the kin, whether it be a future prospect or second, third round pick, whatever they can generate in interest coming back. I know there's been some speculation about Antti Ranta. I think that at this point, I'd be surprised to see them move Ranta. I think he's still kind of considered their goalie of the future, but they need to get him signed. He doesn't have a contract for next year, and he is unrestricted, so there is a possibility that he could leave on his own anyhow. They may trade him if they feel like they're not going to be able to re-sign him, but at the same time, they've had a lot of inconsistency with a lot of guys, a lot of moving parts here. If they can get Ranta locked up longer term, I think that's probably a wise move. They do have a lot of good young forwards still in their system. So obviously they have Clayton Keller, Max Domi, Brandon Perlini, just to name a few. They've got more on the way. I mean, this team really should be getting better each year. They do have a lot of young prospects, and hopefully as time goes on here, they can get better and better. They probably need to bring in a little bit of veteran leadership, though, to kind of stabilize things. I mean, Derek Stepan is a good start, but they could use an extra couple of veterans down there to kind of help things out. But the problem is our veteran players are going to want to sign with the Coyotes, considering the situation and how poorly the team has done in the last number of years. Another player I think the Coyotes would not mind trading, but it's hard to say where he's not a pending UFA. If it would go down, it would be Nicholas Chalmerson. Chalmerson was another defenseman brought in this year to help stabilize things, and it hasn't really worked out with him in the Coyotes. So it's hard to say if there could be a deal there, but if there is, I think they'd make the deal. Otherwise, that's something that may go down in the offseason, but where he's not a pending UFA, the teams are going to have to pony up a little bit more for him than somebody like Luke Schenn. Jumping over now to the LA Kings, obviously the Kings are going to be getting hopefully a late season addition back of their own in form of Jeff Carter, which should give them a nice boost. As we all remember here, the LA Kings got off to a flying start this year, and we're at one point where the front runners in the division. They've since regressed back. They're still in a playoff spot, but they've certainly taken major steps backwards, and we've seen teams like, for example, like Vegas move ahead of them. So is LA going to do anything here at the deadline? It's really tough to say. I think that it's been speculated before that in order for them to get another top forward into their mix, they're going to have to move a guy like either Martinez or Muzzin on the back end to do just that. I'm not sure that that's something that they want to do, but it's probably going to be necessary in order for them to land a top forward if they were looking at a player like a Max Pacioretty, for example, or a Mike Hoffman or Evander Kane or any of those other top wingers that are on the trade market as of right now. Personally, I don't think LA is going to be able to do a whole lot. They do have a lot of contracts in the forward group that are already quite long-term, and even though they're not too bad salary cap-wise, I just don't see them adding a whole lot here. Considering they're going to be getting Jeff Carter back near the end of the year, I would think that that's going to be their form of a rental player, and that they probably don't see a whole lot more out of LA. I mean, if they do, they're going to have to trade one of their top defenders, which is something I'm not sure they're prepared to do at this given time. Now, last but not least, let's take a look at the Anaheim Ducks. Obviously, the Ducks have had a bit of an up-and-down season as well, but as of right now, look to be in a position to likely make the playoffs. The Ducks right now are probably in a position where if they did add anything here at the deadline, it more likely would be a forward. But I mean, when you get guys like Getzlaf, you have Perry, Kessler, you've got Jacob Silverberg, Rickard Rakell. I mean, they've got a pretty solid top six group. You've got other guys like Cogliano and Kasha. You know, they've got a pretty solid forward group as it is. They are missing Patrick Eaves quite substantially. He played a big role when he first joined the team for a while. Obviously, he's been out majority of the season with Guillain-Barré syndrome, and I've yet to find a timetable or if there's anything expected on when he may be able to return to the lineup. I mean, it is possible that he may not be back this year, and that's a big blow for the Ducks. So do they go out and get another player to replace a guy like him? It is certainly possible. I have heard the Ducks' name in the Max Pacioretty trade rumors in the past. Hard to say if something like that goes down. I mean, they do have some young forwards. Like, for example, they have a really good center in the prospect in Sam Steele, who played for Canada at the World Junior Championships this past year. I know he could be a center that Montreal would have their eye on, and maybe a Steele, and maybe they'd have to throw in, I'm not sure what else, either a defenseman or perhaps some other draft picks to have the package big enough to land Pacioretty. But it is quite plausible that that's a deal that could go down. We already seen them add Adam Henrique, as that trade for Sami Vatanen happened earlier this year. Henrique has fit in quite well. So, I mean, you've already got lots of guys playing center between Kessler, Getzlaf, Henrique. I mean, they've got all kinds of depth at center ice. There's no issues there. They do have some good wingers as well. So, I mean, you never know. I mean, what they would do between, you've got Corey Perry, Rickard Rakell, who can also play center. You've got Cogliano, you know, you've got Kasha. You know, they got all kinds. Jacob Silverberg's having another decent season for the Ducks. I mean, really, the Ducks overall aren't too bad. So I'm not really sure if going after Pacioretty's a move that they would make. I know it's been speculated before. I could see it maybe going down, but I would think that maybe Sam Steele and another guy, perhaps even like a Silverberg or a Kasha or something like that, might have to be included to get that done. And I'm not sure that's a deal they would do. But at the same time, I think having Max Pacioretty in your top six certainly would be an upgrade if that's something they chose to do. So certainly leave some comments down below on the Pacific Division teams. What do you think these teams are going to do? What are your big surprises this year? And what teams do you think are going to be the most active here at the deadline? And it's hard to say what's going to go down. It should be an interesting day on February the 26th. Don't forget as well to follow us on Twitter. You're going to see our Twitter handle on the screen right here. We're also on Instagram and Facebook. All of those links are in the description down below. Thanks very much for watching, everybody. We'll catch you next time.